You guys ask me all the time, what is the best Druid build? And this is my pick. I've been working on perfecting this build, and this is the culmination of Poison Claw and Stormclaw in one build. This is the best all-around solo build for Druid. It has insane DPS, insane survivability, insane movement speed, insane attack speed. You never have to worry about spirit, and you can clear all the content in the game basically blindfolded. Nightmare 100 dungeons, easy. Lilith, easy. The rest of the bosses, a joke. But don't take my word for it, I have a bunch of gameplay with the build showing me clearing tier 100 dungeons and all of the bosses. And I did all of it without using an elixir. And this is unintended, but I actually forgot to use my Prey on the Weak Vampire power. So that's actually 16% less damage that I had in all of the recordings I'm showing you. But I still cleared everything effortlessly. But if you want to see this build in action live, come by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamheart. I meticulously put this build together to give you just the right amount of armor and resistances to cap out for Nightmare 100 dungeons. Real quick before we get into the build, do me a solid and click on the link below the stream. Right now, Factor is offering a 50% discount if you use my code or use my link. And after the first week, you can cancel it if you want to. But you'll be getting 1 week of really good cheap food, and you'll be helping me and supporting my stream. So why don't you pause the video, go click on the link, get some Factor, and then come back to the video. So first off, let's clear up some common misconceptions with the build. Some people told me that the X-Falls ring cannot be triggered with the poison from Claw. That meaning Toxic Claws or the poison passive that you can choose instead of swiping twice. That's actually not true. It can trigger on any poison from what I've seen. So if we do a Poison Creeper, it'll probably trigger. Yep, you just saw one there. Now if I wait for that poison to go away and I start attacking with my Claw, you will eventually see that it will trigger one. Although the chance does seem to be lower. So I don't know exactly why that is. Oh, there we go, we saw one. I don't know why the chance is lower with Claw specifically, because the lucky hit chance on Claw is actually quite high. If I look at my Claw right now, this says lucky hit chance is 65%, which is actually much higher than Poison Creeper, which is at 36%. Not really 100% sure on that. I'm assuming that has something to do with the fact that it is not Claw itself that is factoring in as the lucky hit, but the passive, and I'm guessing passives have a set lucky hit percentage that is unseen. For example, if I use Metamorphosis, this doesn't list that it has a lucky hit chance, but if I use my Poison Creeper and I start dashing through, oh, what do you know, first one, I got a reset on my Poison Creeper, and this is actually something that is relatively consistent. So Metamorphosis actually has a huge amount of lucky hit chance. So I'm guessing it's the same thing in our abilities. If we look at our Toxic Claws, we don't see a lucky hit chance here, but I'm guessing it has a very low one. So guesstimating maybe 10-20%, something like that. Now it's important to note that the poison, applying a lot of different poisons, or, you know, if you're attacking a boss, for example, you're not going to have a high chance of getting a proc for the X-Falls ring on the boss, because it seems to be on a per poison target basis. So if I poison multiple enemies like I just did, you see how it happened? It's much more likely that one of those 5 enemies is going to have a proc. So this means that when you're running through a Nightmare dungeon, it's really powerful to use Poison Creeper on a big group of enemies, because if you hit 10 enemies, for example, you're likely to get one of those to proc. Also, because I'm using Godslayer Crown, Poison Creeper pulls enemies together when I hit an elite mob. So this actually pulls enemies together and then triggers the X-Falls. So that will kill big groups of enemies really easily. But this also means that on bosses, this is not nearly as strong. So you can swap out X-Falls for a ring with Edge Masters on it when you're doing bosses. So if you're doing Lilith and you need that little bit of extra damage, feel free to go with that. One more thing that I found interesting is Hurricane technically says damage to surrounding enemies over 8 seconds. So it is a damage over time. But I think that for X-Falls, it applies to dots that can actually be put on the enemy. Since this is something that's coming from you and it's only happening if you're near them and hitting them and not something you're actually applying to them, it doesn't seem to count. Also, one more bonus thing I noticed, if you watch my lightning bolts here, if we sit here and watch the damage, you'll see that it's showing 92,000 for all the non-crits. Now if I step right over here, wait for it, let's look for a non-crit, 73,000. So this right here, this little point, or this little corner in the wood on the ground, seems to be about what the distance for damage to close ends. So right here, I still have damage to close enemies. And that is further than the melee range by a fair margin, which, you know, previously I thought you had to be within melee range in order to actually get the damage to close and benefits like that. So if that's helpful for you, awesome. All right, so first off, we've got the skills. We're using Claw as our basic attack. We're using Blood Howl. We're using Poison Creeper, Hurricane, Cyclone Armor, and Petrify. Petrify is our ultimate, and this is basically our get out of jail free card, or used to stun elite packs. It can also be used to trigger Godslayer if you're using Godslayer, and that'll cause all the enemies to pull together, and they'll also be stunned, which is really good. We can use this to kill basically every elite pack, because if you're using Flicker Step, you're going to be able to get your ult back by the next elite pack. Cyclone Armor, I don't use the active on this really. You can use it to get out of a sticky situation if you're like stuck between enemies, but for the most part, I'm not going to use it at all. And then we've got Hurricane. This is a good source of damage reduction, but it will also just constantly damage enemies around you. Poison Creeper, this is going to be really good with our Godslayer. It's going to pull enemies together, and it's going to cause our X-Falls to trigger, which will kill big groups of enemies. By the way, there is a passive damage reduction from Cyclone Armor, so that's the main reason we're using that. We could have gone with something that has a useful active here, but I didn't really feel like there was anything I wanted too much. For the Blood Howl, it's mostly for healing us, giving us an attack speed boost, and for triggering our Vigilance passive. And with Claw, don't forget that when you use Claw, you're automatically using Storm Strike as well. A lot of people ask me, like, hey, why is Storm Strike in the build if it's not on my bar? Well, when you're using the Great Staff of the Crone, your Claw will automatically cast Storm Strike. For the Spirit Boons, we're using Wariness, Scythe Talons, Iron Feather, Pack Leader, and Overload. For our uniques, I recommend using Godslayer, Tybalt's Will, Flicker Step, Great Staff of the Crone, and X-Falls. Like I said before, X-Falls is only really useful in Nightmare Dungeons. On bosses, you can leave it on, it doesn't really matter that much, but it wouldn't hurt to have a swap ring if you want. Don't forget to be using your dashes in order to trigger Tybalt's Will. Metamorphosis is a vampire ability, and that gives us Unstoppable, and it triggers the extra damage from Tybalt's. Also by dashing, we're triggering Flicker Step, which is reducing our ult cooldown. Now, make sure you don't do this build without Great Staff of the Crone. For the helm, there's actually a lot of options. You can go with a legendary helm that has Aspect of Might on it. You could always go with the Shaco, or you could go with Undariel's Visage. You can even go with Tempest Roar and use Mad Wolf's Glee as the chest piece, and that will give you a nice bonus as well. If you don't have Tybalt's Will, then you're going to want to use the defensive aspect here. Something like Aspect of Might if you have a helmet, or you could use Vigorous Aspect, which gives us more damage reduction while we're Werewolf. On our boots, anything with movement speed like Ghost Walkers or Craven will work fine there. And the aspect, if you're not using X-Falls, is going to be Edgemasters. For our gems, we're going with Emerald, Ruby, and Diamond. You can go with Topaz on the weapon, but we have a lot of different sources of damage from our Overcharge, from our Rune Workers, from our X-Falls, from our Undariel's Visage. There's a lot of different sources of damage, and not all of them are going to benefit from Topaz. However, Emerald's going to allow us to utilize a lot more different damage types. For Vampire powers, we're going with Moonrise, Ravenous, Prey on the Weak, Undying, and Metamorphosis. Moonrise and Ravenous are obviously for attack speed. Prey on the Weak increases our damage. Undying increases our survivability by healing us a ton. And this heals you even if you're attacking and you're not hitting enemies. Metamorphosis is a fantastic vampire ability. It allows you to gain Unstoppable when you dash. Because we're using Flicker Step, we're going to be able to get our dash back every couple of attacks, and you can attack thin air and get this dash back. It also does damage to enemies. It has a high lucky hit chance, so you're triggering your cooldown on your creeper. There's a lot of great things about this. If you want more details on the build that I haven't mentioned in the video, there's a whole written section on the written guide, and you can find this in my Discord at discord.gg/screamheart. I did put stat prioritization here. But if you're on Mobalytics, you can always click this little tab, and it shows you the stats on every single piece of gear. On our skill tree, we're going to max out Storm Strike and Claw. We're going to grab Wild Claw and Fierce Storm Strike. We're going to max out Predatory Instinct and Digital Gate. We're going to max out Ancestral Fortitude, Vigilance. We're going to put 1 point into Blood Howl and Preserving Blood Howl, and then we're also going to be grabbing Cyclone Armor and Preserving Cyclone Armor. For Poison Creeper, we're going to go 1 point into Poison Creeper and then Brutal Poison Creeper. Then we're going to max out our Bad Omen. We're going to put 1 point into Hurricane and get Savage Hurricane. We're going to put 1 point into Toxic Claws and max out in Venom. For our ultimate, we're going to put 1 point in Petrify as well as 1 point into Prime Petrify. We're going to max out Defiance, and then we're going to also max out Heightened Senses. For our Keystone passive, we're going Ursine Strength. Keep in mind, this doesn't require being in bear form in order to trigger. We always get 25% extra damage, and this is multiplicative, if we are healthy. We also get the overpower damage, but that's not really relevant here. For our Paragon boards, we're going to be grabbing all of the rare nodes in the first board and the Keeper Glyph. For our second board, we're doing Inner Beast. We're going to get Fang and Claw here, and we're going to get all of the rare nodes here as well. Our third board is going to be Thunderstruck. We're going to be putting Spirit here, getting our Legendary node, and grabbing a good chunk of the rare nodes through the middle. Back across the other side, we're going to be grabbing Heightened Malice, and we're getting Electrocution here. We're going to get a couple of the rare nodes, and then we're going to be attaching the Constricting Tendrils board and putting Territorial here. We're going to get both of the rare nodes that are near the glyph, and then we'll move up back across again, and we're going to be attaching Ancestral Guidance, where we're going to put our Tracker, and we're going to grab a couple more rare nodes. It should look something like this when you're done. If you're already on the Stormclaw or the Poison Claw build, this should be a relatively easy transition for you. But I highly recommend this one either way because this is extremely solid. I'm definitely clearing groups of enemies much faster, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think the boss damage is higher as well. Now I just need to get an Andariel's Visage so I can actually test it. Feel free to comment below and let me know what you think. And if you liked the video, hit that thumbs up. But until the next video, Daddy Druid out.